throw a zombie head at a fascist and storm the beaches of Normandy because we have the finale of The Walking Dead DARYL DIXON, and I gotta say, this show has been quite the ride. There's a lot to talk about in this video, from the return of Carol, Codron's decision, and whether or not Daryl will head back to America or stay in France. Now this video is going to be a bit different than my previous ones, with more of an emphasis on theories than recap, and I've left timestamps below so you can see all the topics I'll be covering. That being said, make sure to like and subscribe as we take a look at some of the finale's biggest events. The beginning of the episode actually begins with a flashback from World War II. Here we see Daryl's grandfather William Dixon dead on the beaches of Normandy. The Dixons have a history of abandonment from their fathers. William died in the war, Daryl's father was barely around, and now Daryl will abandon Laurent. As Isabel says,
"You think you're escaping history by doing this, but you're not. You're repeating it."
Daryl isn't exactly jovial about his grandfather's sacrifice, bitter that it left his grandmother and family shattered back home. What Daryl fails to see is that sometimes sacrifices need to be made in order to fight for a greater cause. His grandfather fought against fascism, something Genet looks to be bringing back. It's a bit ironic that his grandfather stormed the beaches of Normandy while Daryl fights to leave them. That is until he sees Laurent. The finale leaves us with a decision. Will Daryl go back to America or will he stay in France? I actually think there are three scenarios, and I'll outline which one I think the writers of the show will go with. First, we have Daryl going back to America without Laurent. I don't think this is going to happen. It would be a shitty thing to do to Laurent and works against the Carol plot of her searching for Daryl. That whole plotline would be kinda useless if he just shows up back in America next season. The second scenario is Daryl taking Laurent with him to America. Laurent did ask Daryl if he could come with him, but let's be real, this whole union depends on Laurent being with them to fight Genet. Plus, if season 2 is back in America, we lose one of the greatest things about this show. In an interview, executive producer Greg Nicotero said that part of the fun of setting this show in France were all the cool new locations they could explore. We're talking abbeys, castles, the Eiffel Tower, catacombs. If we go back to America, we lose all these cool things. From both a story and character standpoint, I think the best decision the writers can make here is having Daryl stay in France with Laurent. This way we can continue the Genet storyline while simultaneously having Carol be the one to find Daryl. I think this opens up a lot of cool new opportunities. Will Carol go directly to France? Will she make a stop in England? I'd love to see her have a detour in London so we can explore cool places there. Maybe she'll even make some allies to help in the Union's fight against Genet. Speaking of Carol, let's talk about her. In an episode 5 flashback, we learn that Daryl promised to Carol he'd be on his way back. He tells her that he's a couple miles outside of Freeport, Maine, and if you look behind the biker at the end of episode 6, we'll see she's hot on Daryl's tracks, even finding this dude riding Daryl's bike, the same bike he was riding the day he left Carol. He must have picked it up shortly after Daryl was imprisoned and sent to the tanker. The biker tells Carol that he picked the bike up at an encampment near a gas station, and that is exactly where Daryl was before he was captured. No doubt Carol will soon learn of Daryl's fate, which will lead her overseas. We also don't get any further information on Carol's radio message, the one where she said blank came back. Some of the theories I've heard on who came back are Rick, Michonne, Morgan, and Dwight, but it's possible she's not referring to a person at all. She could have said, "It came back." As user Stanye East on Reddit theorizes, she might have said, "Ezekiel's sick, it came back," referring to his cancer. Perhaps the biggest WTF moment of the episode revolves around Codron's decision to save Daryl and kill Genet's men. I found this out of character for a guy who's been hunting Daryl the entire season, who just a few hours ago was basking in the idea that today would be Daryl's last day on Earth.
"Today you die!"
But the writers have yet again managed to provide a few explanations for this decision. When interrogated by Genet, Codron says that he could not kill a child, r.e. Laurent. That I could understand, but why not kill Daryl? Maybe this damages his story that they were ambushed and outnumbered if Daryl were to be killed. Maybe he knows they'll need Daryl for the rest of the trek to the nest. But the explanation I find most interesting is more supernatural. There's a saying in writing called Deus Ex Machina. Basically, it's a term for when an unsolvable problem is suddenly resolved by an unexpected intervention. In this case, the unsolvable problem is facing imminent death by Codron, and it's resolved by his sudden change of heart. This divine-like intervention may have something to do with Laurent. Throughout the season, the show has played with us on whether or not Laurent is really this second coming of Christ, and this scene is no exception. Right before Codron is about to kill him, Laurent says, "God loves you." Then Codron changes his mind. Was this a literal act of divine intervention? Genet tells Codron that it will only get more painful as he's taken away by the guards. Is she implying that he could be one of the scientist's next test subjects? Speaking of experiments, Daryl and Quinn's battle with the variant zombies gave us several more clues on what might actually be happening. In episode 5, we learned that Genet was bringing zombies from America to be tested on in France. This may have something to do with the zombies in France being of a variant nature. Isabelle calls them brouillon. Their blood acts as some sort of acid. In her big speech last episode, and I'm paraphrasing here, Genet talked about how the cure for these zombies must come from the zombies themselves. We see one of the variant zombies, who was injected with this unknown serum, immediately attack and kill another zombie. Is Genet's plan to create this kind of super zombie that can wipe out other zombies? Earlier in the season, as well as in the finale, we see how the serum only lasts a few seconds before killing its host. Obviously, these experiments need a lot more time to perfect, but I think it would be a great failsafe to have these super zombies spontaneously combust after a few minutes. Imagine unleashing a few of these souped up zombies on that horde underneath the Eiffel Tower. When the job is all done, the super zombies just explode. It seems the only thing our scientist needs to do now is make it last longer. One thing I am disappointed about this season is its lack of a connection to the French creation of the virus in the first place. I thought this season would center more around Daryl getting to the bottom of this virus, since it's heavily implied the outbreak started at a lab in Paris. If you could find out where the virus began, maybe it could give us clues on how to cure it. This was part of the reason Maggie tasked Daryl on this mission in the first place, to find out what's out there. I also wanted more backstory behind the big antagonist, Genet. Why is she the way she is? The writers have kind of hinted that she used to be a mother, perhaps even losing a child. I'd love to see a flashback of her life before the outbreak that explains why she's turned into this fascist who says she'll do unspeakable things if it means the future generation doesn't have to. We learned that she used to work nights at a museum where she'd see paintings stare at her, suggesting she was a night security guard. This is pretty interesting considering her disdain for art, specifically Impressionism, when talking with Quinn in episode 4.
Impressionism, it's degenerate art.
I suspect season 2 will ramp up the feud between the Union and her army. Those are all the big topics I wanted to cover in this video. Now I turn it over to you. What are your biggest thoughts and theories? I want to hear them in the comments below. Thanks for watching. For more bad takes, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at ThinkStoryYT. Until next time, remember, Daddy loves you very much.